Hey everyone. I am really excited to introduce you. If you if you don't know about Dawnie Walton, you are going to right now. She is an author. Uh, the book, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, is out now in paperback, and I'm really excited to have Dawnie here to talk about kind of her, not to use the word, I feel like people use journey so much, but her journey, how she got interested in writing, the development of the characters, and kind of thinking about the thing that really attracted me to this book was the sort of longing to re-envision history to be inclusive and to involve icons that we feel like we wish we would have seen, and how that sort of opens the door for future narratives, and to kind of create a world that we want to live in with inspiring people. So anyway, Dawnie, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about your book.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to chat with you, Carissa.
So if we could kind of start back in I guess the question for me is, how did you know you were a writer? Or when did you start thinking about yourself as a creative?
Yeah, I mean, I think this sounds a little cliche, but ever since I was a kid, I loved writing stories. I remember being probably about 9 years old and my family taking a trip on Amtrak from Jacksonville to Miami because my grandfather was afraid to fly and we had to go to a funeral. And, I kind of like complained so much about the trip that my grandpa was like, you need to write a story about this, like write out all the things. And, like I was always kind of influenced by my family because they were great storytellers in general. They would sit around the kitchen table and reminisce and things like that. And I was an only child and kind of quiet. And so I would look from one to the other and they always encouraged my writing, but it was sort of, and this is not me like saying that they discouraged me from fiction. They did not, absolutely. But we were just of a mindset to apply those skills to something a little more stable. And so, I always was like, oh, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to work in a magazine or a newspaper or things like that. I'm going to have a steady job and make a career out of it. And so that's what I went to undergraduate school for. Got my journalism degree and then spent the next several years kind of dutifully on the corporate ladder, climbing. And in 2013, I was sort of at the top of that career. I was an executive editor at Essence, and I had, a pretty great resume that included Life and Entertainment Weekly and all these iconic brands. But by that time, the magazine industry was really challenged. And what I had gotten into the business for, which was working with words, editing, writing, was kind of going away in my job. And it became more of a management job and dealing with budgets and unfortunately having to like make staff cuts, which I absolutely hated, of course. And so my writing desire like never really went away. It just kind of intensified. And I started waking up at like 4 a.m. to just for myself working on these characters that were in my head, Opal primarily. And at some point it just became too little time, those little bits I was able to steal from the day. And I was also going through some personal changes that had me kind of reevaluating everything in my life and willing to take more of a risk. And so, long story short, I learned about MFA programs. I learned that some of them are fully funded, which sort of alleviated a lot of my anxiety about potentially going into debt. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like took stock of my savings, applied to 11 different programs across the country, and
ended up a lot of work.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And by the time I decided to do it, the applications were due in like a month and a half. So I had to really get cracking. And I ended up getting accepted to the Iowa Writers Workshop. And the rest is history. Here we are.
I think I've heard you talk a little bit about how you went to the MFA program, into an MFA program, and you were the oldest one in your
Yes.
class. And
Yes.
when I think about sort of the disservice of having education pushed on us as youth and being able to like actually enjoy um, the time, having the time. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and then how Opal and Net going into it with a project,
Yes.
how
That is
that was for you?
a great question, and one I'm really glad you asked, because um, I don't know that there was another point in my life that I would have been happier or like more productive than the age I was when I went. I was the exact right age for me because I knew what it was like to work a 9 to 5. I knew what it was like to not have time and space to focus on my fiction. And
Get up
so,
at 4 a.m. and still work a 10-hour day, and then piecemeal again in the evening.
yeah. And I also had a certain discipline in terms of the work. I also had a focus and a drive. And all those things came together, and it was just a dream, you know? Like there's lots of chatter on social media about the value of MFA programs and people saying they had terrible experiences. And I absolutely hear that. And I believe that it's not the right thing for everybody. But for me, I was like, whatever petty dramas happen, like just the fact that it's such a dream kind of overwhelms all of that. And I also felt like I had a confidence in who I was and what I was doing. And so, whatever feedback I got that might have been like, critique, I didn't really take it to heart because, well, I've been in a career where you get edited a lot. And so I'm used to that. But also, in workshop, I could listen to, I knew what to pick up as advice and what to discard because I knew what I was trying to do. I knew what my intention was, and nothing could really waver me from that.
Can we talk a little bit about what that intention was and sort of how you were? I feel like the steadfastness in that is really admirable, and also who this book is for. Sorry, that was like really three
Yeah.
questions in one.
Yeah. So I didn't really know how to write a novel when I started this book. I didn't know what I was doing. I had never really been, trained at the college or graduate level, anything about fiction writing. So I didn't really know what the detail of the story would be, and the plot points changed all the time. But what I did know is who I wanted Opal to be.
Mm-hmm.
For me, Opal, I always describe her as the rock star that I would have loved to pin to my bedroom wall when I was a teenager growing up, and really interested in a lot of the music of the time that felt exciting, but also felt like people like me weren't part of it. And so, I wanted her to be wild and messy and make this loud, outrageous, exciting music. But the other thing was that I wanted her to be very comfortable in her own skin. I wanted her to be comfortable in her community, in her Blackness. I wanted her to not shrink away from political content. I wanted her to understand that her voice has resonance. And all of those things, like that was key to me for her, like through the whole thing. And I knew kind of the end note that I wanted her to end on. Like I wanted her story to feel real and also have a lot of disappointments in it, as would be the case, but also be very hopeful.
Sorry, when you said that I would just wanted her to feel comfortable in her own skin. I imagine that's I've been thinking about it a lot, like what that would take and what that would look like, and
Yeah.
how you could raise a human with that as a value. And I think that that really is like poignant, the like the comfort, and it's not an ease, because she's got a lot of fucking hardships.
Oh yeah.
Um, but there's
Yeah.
like a resiliency.
Yeah. And to me, more than anything, not any kind of level of fame she achieves, like none of the trappings around her, but that thing, the comfort in her skin, was the thing for me that made her iconic and made her someone that I would have really admired, and someone that I could have I kind of probably needed at a certain point of my identity formation, and understanding that all the fragments of myself fit together just fine.
Do you think that in some ways writing this book gave you that comfort in your own skin, as well as creating it within her?
Yeah, I think well, I think first of all, I think my college experience, so I grew up in Jacksonville, went to a primarily white academic magnet school, which was great and made many wonderful friends. But I did have some kind of like feeling fragmented, you know? And then for college, I went to an HBCU, and that's when I sort of like the fragments began to come together. And it was such a beautiful awakening for me, and an acceptance of everything I am, and starting to open up to people about everything that I loved, without kind of fear of judgment or anything like that. And I think like this book was kind of like trying to express someone who kind of always had that. Yeah. And so I feel like I was able to write her because I did kind of feel that it had been a journey for me personally. Yeah.
Are there, I mean, it's interesting to think about how I could find you in all of the characters, but can you talk a little bit about Sunny? We didn't talk
Yeah.
about the development of Sunny, and
Sure.
if you how you might find yourself in Sunny.
Yeah. So I had written probably 2/3 of a full draft that was just the straight oral histories, just the straight interviews, before Sunny came into the picture. And this was the result of a workshop I did where my classmates said, you know, we're so curious who's on the other side of the recorder, who's listening to the stories, who's processing them. And that's when the idea of Sunny came about. So Sunny is the journalist who's putting together the oral history. She's interviewing everyone, but she also has a very personal tie to Opal and Nev. Her father was a drummer for them and was killed before she was born at an Opal and Nev concert during a race riot that breaks out at one of their shows. And so Sunny is trying to, you know, tell in an interesting way the story of this cult music duo. You know, there's lots of like legend around them, but she's trying to find the truth there, but she's also trying to understand who the father is that she never knew. And so she has personal stakes in the story. And you know, it's interesting. I think that writing the Sunny character helped me to put on that hat of a journalist, you know, because it really sort of challenged me to kind of squint at the myths around Opal and Nev, and to have a more critical eye on all of the characters. Even though I loved Opal, you know, Opal gets a critical eye in moments. And
100%. Her relationship, I should say that there is an affair as well. I mean,
yes. So Opal was having an affair with Sunny's father at the time of his death. So, you know, Sunny's mother was pregnant, and it was a whole big mess. And so, of course, Sunny's family feels a certain kind of way toward Opal. And Sunny has very complicated feelings about Opal, you know, like on one hand, she sort of holds her up as this taboo figure, idol, right? And then on the other hand, like there's all this mess and drama that Opal has caused in her family for her mother. And yeah, it becomes very sticky.
Just to go back to two questions that we kind of talked to about a little bit earlier, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about the purpose of that reminiscing, or why as humans it's important to kind of sit around a table and talk about our stories and compare it and contrast. Because I think it's something that, especially during the pandemic, is that we've lost in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I don't know. It's a big question. And I think that I've always been interested in different perspectives on the same thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that we absorb events differently and have different reactions to it. And for me, like the part that was the hardest emotionally to write, but also the most satisfying in a way, is, you know, the Rivington showcase scene, which is the big concert scene in which the drummer Jimmy, Sonny's father, is killed. And literally, you know, I was sort of thinking about that scene, and I was thinking about all the different perspectives on that event and how different people would take different traumas from it in a way. For one secondary character, you know, she remembers being in the dressing room and sort of being groped by members of the Bond Brothers, sort of the Southern rock band. And so that's kind of like the thing that is lingering for her. For other characters, it's different things, but it's all important, you know, and it all kind of adds up to a fuller picture of that moment that sort of changed everyone's lives. And I literally thought of the characters as cameras, and I placed them in different areas of the theater where the concert takes place, so that they could literally kind of like report those different angles and those different reactions. And I think that, you know, although Opal's voice is most prominent in that chapter, I think it adds like a pastiche to kind of give a encapsulation of that era of music and the tumultuousness of the time.
Mm-hmm. I think as a person who really wants to believe in a collective reality or a shared reality that we can all sort of exist within, it's a very sort of accurate, it's very accurate or true to my understanding of how reality works at this moment. I wanted to also ask about how kind of your take on how you feel, what's your role when you tell other people's stories, whether they be fictional or real people?
Yeah, it took me, you know, between first writing the first words of this book in 2013 to publishing was an 8-year journey. And a lot of that 8 years was time spent thinking really, really, really carefully about each character and trying to do each of them justice and being very careful with what I have them saying, the things I have them doing. You know,
Which
one
shows, by the
example.
way.
Oh,
Sorry.
one of the characters, Virgil, right? Like he's Opal's best friend. He's her stylist. I wanted to be careful not to write into tropes about, you know, like a gay Black man in New York City. And so like I was very careful to make sure that I gave Virgil his own life and his own dreams and his own partner and his own, you know, like I didn't want to make him a sidekick character. So that's what I was thinking about with each of the characters. Even Chet Bond, who is kind of a villain in the book, even Chet gets a chance to kind of explain, no matter what we think of it, explain his point of view and his reasonings. And, you know, he does have a bit of, you know, he has an issue with, he has addiction issues, and he, you know, he's very open about that and how that kind of led to some of the behavior in the book. And so kind of affording every character a bit of empathy, I guess, you know, was important to me. Yeah.
I think that for me, empathy kind of goes in sort of waves. It's weird to say in fashion or out of fashion, but but for me, it's extremely powerful to think about things from other people's perspectives and offer them grace, whether you agree or not. I guess I go by the sort of Mr. Rogers. I think it's Mr. Rogers, who's like, I never met someone I couldn't love once I heard their story, whatever that quote is. But I guess I shouldn't insert my opinion on whether we should.
Yeah.
I think, but I mean, use it not to like use your word, but doing it carefully and thoughtfully,
Yeah.
I think is also equally important.
Yeah. It's difficult because like I'm not sure I'm there quite yet, but what I do know is that there are reasons that people are the way that they are, whether it's through family, what they learn from their family or their environment. I mean, there's reasons, right? And so things just don't happen in a vacuum. And so, you know, that I was very intentional about trying to give people their reasons.
I think that's actually, I'm going to have to backpedal on, I feel allow me to backpedal on what I said. I think I was in an interview recently where someone brought up the idea that whenever I don't understand someone's actions, I'm missing a crucial part of the context. And I think that sort of speaks to what you're saying, of like giving people their reasons, and you can, if not agree with them or support them, but at least understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Dawnie, we're almost out of time, but I was wondering, I know that this newsletter is about secrets, and I wanted to ask you if you could speak a little bit, because this book is about secrets and the things that also we're like able to let other people see, and sort of the hidden truths that we hold on to. And I was wondering if you could, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think secrets are great for drama, you know, and they're great for me in writing the novel because, you know, I was always sort of thinking of the characters as two people at once. There's the public persona that they have, and then there's the actual real person underneath. And so kind of the tension between those two versions of everyone was something I was thinking about in the background all the time. And then there's a central secret, a really big secret that I won't spoil, of course, at the center of the novel. And, you know, sometimes these things are very, very ugly, you know, and the secret at the center of the book is quite ugly, and it comes, I will say, from an unexpected source, you know. And so because it comes from a source that is perhaps perceived by many as unreliable, but it's kind of like there's such a ring of truth to it that it is very disturbing to the characters. I know I'm not really making sense if people haven't read the book yet, but hopefully this intrigues people to pick it up and check it out.
Well, Dawnie, thank you so much for doing this. I want to actually, since we're out of time, I want to just end on kind of where you are at this moment in terms of now that you've let this book out into the world, and kind of how that process has been for you, but also if there's anything that's really inspiring you at the moment.
Yeah. So I am at the place where I am trying to think about a second project, and I'll be honest, you know, it's very challenging. There's so much love that I have for this book. And it is, we talked earlier about it being a process of letting a project go, and I think it is sort of the magic that you feel when you're writing the book and you don't know what's going to become of it. You don't have an agent, you're ignorant of the publication process, all of those things. You're just writing it for the pure love of it and the love of the story and the characters. That's really magical.
Yeah.
That period. And I'm sort of like in a process of kind of grieving that period, sort of knowing that I'll never really quite feel that way again. But also like trying to very deliberately think about a story that captures my attention and my obsession as much as this one did, or if not as much, then close. That's where I am right now.
Can you give us any sort of topics or things that are sort of catching?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Friendship between women, especially over the course of decades, and what it takes to keep those friendships alive, and sort of the disappointments that happen along the way, and how outside forces affect a friendship. Like that's kind of like what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
Do you think you'll write a memoir?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't know that I have that kind of courage yet.
Well, I'm going to stay tuned. Thank you so much, Dawnie, for working on this incredible masterpiece, and for also talking and being vulnerable with kind of the difficult grieving place of letting go of a project or a love. And kind of thank you also for, I don't know, this is projecting that you have hope to keep going and to find something new, explore that, and then we will all delight in it.
Oh, thank you. I love this conversation. I love just talking about art so deeply. And
I really appreciate you taking time to do it, everybody. The final revival of Opal and Nev is in paper book now. I just want to remind you, I'll put links to buy it in the email. But take care, everyone.
thank you.